Good morning, everybody. Buenos días. This is the San Diego-Tijuana Air Quality Task Force meeting. Hoy estamos en la reunión del equipo de trabajo de calidad de aire de San Diego y Tijuana. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Like our other meetings, we will be providing live interpretation to Spanish. Como nuestras otras reuniones, vamos a ofrecer interpretación a español. Y ahorita le voy a pasar el micrófono a Giovanna, que va a ser nuestra intérprete para hoy. I will be passing the mic over to our interpreter, Giovanna, who will be offering Spanish interpretation today.
Good morning. I will give this interpreting announcement in English and in Spanish, and we'll also add this to the chat. Buenos días, voy a dar este anuncio sobre la interpretación en inglés y en español, y también lo agregaré en el chat. In order to provide language access, we will be providing simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. If you're not bilingual in English and Spanish, you will have to select your language in order to hear the interpretation. If you are on a laptop or desktop, when I'm done with this announcement, locate the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen that says interpretation. Please click on the globe now and select English. If you are on an iPad or iPhone, in a few seconds, locate the three-dot menu and select language interpretation, then select English and click done. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace. Thank you. Esta reunión contará con una interpretación simultánea bidireccional en inglés y en español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe, tendrá que elegir su idioma para escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, cuando acabe de dar este anuncio, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice interpretación. Haga clic ahí ahora y seleccione español. Si está usando un iPad o su teléfono, en unos segundos localice el menú de 3 puntos. Haga clic en interpretación de idiomas, elija español y aceptar. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado. Gracias.
Thank you, Giovanna, for that message, and thank you for your interpretation. The interpretation globe option is now open, so if you are bilingual, you don't need to do anything, but if you're monolingual in English or Spanish, please select your language of choice. And if you have any issues accessing interpretation, feel free to let us know in the chat and we can support you. So for today's meeting, we'll be opening up with some welcoming remarks from Domingo and Saul from the San Diego Air District and the state of Baja California. Followed by that, we have 2 presentations that will be combined by presented by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on air quality health risks on children, as well as indoor air quality risks. Following that, we'll have a roundtable where agencies will provide updates on the San Diego Air Quality Task Force activities. Following that, we will be bringing everyone into panelist mode where you can share your video and ask and have a discussion on the items presented today, as well as any other questions you might have. And following that, we'll just have a closing and invite you all to our next meeting. I'll be quickly going over some meeting agreements. We encourage folks to use the language of your choice. We ask for folks to please create a safe space for everybody and to participate and make space for others to participate as well. We are it's still in the virtual world, so we ask for folks to still speak 1 person at a time. We ask folks to listen to each other and respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspectives. And we will do our best to be conscious of time and get folks out of here by 11:30. Before we move to the presentation, I wanted to pass over the mic over to Domingo and Saul to give some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Chuy. Muchas gracias, Chuy. Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you again at this on this space that we meet with quarterly. Today we have some very interesting presentations. We really hope to make this very engaging. So please feel free to ask questions, whether by raising your hand or putting them in the chat. We are very interested in learning from one another, and we can make this a very rich discussion if we hear from you. And everybody's thoughts are very valuable. So please feel free to share your thoughts with us, your comments, your questions. And I really look forward to learning from our panelists today and from all of you attending today. Thank you. Y bienvenidos. Welcome. Saul, do you have any words for our audience today? Saul, ¿tienes algunas palabras para los que nos acompañan hoy?
Sí, gracias, Domingo. Pues de nueva cuenta, bienvenida a todos, esperando que la época de COVID, deseando que también este periodo que está pasando y cercano a invierno, pues nos agarre mejor preparados. Hay que estar listos. Agradecemos mucho todo el esfuerzo que han hecho la audiencia que nos ha acompañado por mucho tiempo, y esperemos que estos temas que no se agotan sean parte de la dinámica, estar informados de lo que está ocurriendo. Entonces esperemos puedan seguir comentando sobre temas de interés y que, bueno, estas reuniones se enriquezcan también con la participación pública. Gracias, y procedemos entonces a la...
Thank you, Saul y Domingo. Now we'll be moving on to the presentation by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Sarah Sullivan and Alali Baños will be doing a joint presentation on air quality risks on children, as well as indoor air quality.
Thank you all very much for having us today. My name is Sarah Sullivan, and I am the Children's Environmental Health and Healthy Schools Coordinator for EPA Region 9. With me today on the phone is Alali Baños-Kiner, our Asthma and Indoor Air Quality Coordinator. We're really looking forward to providing you with some information about children's environmental health, asthma, and indoor air quality. Next slide, please. EPA's mission is to protect human health and the environment. Environmental hazards and other factors affect lots of different kinds of people. So why do we have staff that focus specifically on children? Because children face different risks than adults, both due to their behavior and due to their physical differences. Children are not little adults. That's a mantra for the children's health staff. Children have unique behaviors that put them into closer contact with contaminants than adults, such as crawling on the floor, putting things in their mouths, eating dirt, and sometimes even drinking toilet water. Children also play close to the ground, which increases their exposure to toxicants in dust, soil, and low-lying toxicants in the air. Next slide, please. Pound for pound, children eat more, drink more, and breathe more than adults. If the air they breathe, the water they drink, or the food they eat is contaminated, children end up taking in proportionately more contaminants than adults. Newborns drink about an average of 6 ounces of formula per kilogram of body weight. This is equivalent to an adult consuming 35 cans of soda or 12 liters of water a day. Children also spend up to 90% of their time indoors, and indoor levels of pollutants may be higher than outdoor levels. We'll talk more about that later on in the presentation. Next slide. The body systems of children are still developing throughout childhood and even through adolescence. As their internal systems develop, they can be impacted by harmful exposures, making it difficult to get rid of harmful contaminants in the body. Their bodies also process chemicals differently than adults, sometimes leading to increased body burdens from the same exposure. Probably most importantly, kids' rapidly developing bodies lead to periods of increased susceptibility to chemicals. Exposures that may ordinarily occur with little or no effect can have devastating lifelong effects if encountered during a critical period of growth of a body system. For example, tissues with fast dividing cells, like the blood and lungs, are especially vulnerable to carcinogens in the first 9 months after birth. But this doesn't, as we often think, just affect very young children. For example, the lungs continue to develop for the first 18 years of life. Understanding these differences, both physical and behavioral, provides a greater understanding of why it's so important to protect children from harmful effects of environmental hazards. Next slide. What do we mean when we mention environmental contaminants or hazards? Environmental contaminants are both natural and man-made materials that can be harmful to humans. If you click, the slide will animate. There are a variety of opportunities for exposure to environmental contaminants at home, as well as in school and childcare settings, including asthma triggers, pests and pesticides, materials and metals such as asbestos, lead and mercury, environmental tobacco smoke, volatile organic compounds or VOCs, such as formaldehyde, paint fumes, art supply fumes, etc., cleaning supplies, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, radon and harmful air particles, carbon monoxide, and other chemicals. One more click, please. EPA has resources and a number of programs designed specifically to help schools, childcare facilities, and communities take action to protect children's health. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? A child's environment shapes their health and can have both short and long-term consequences. When children are negatively affected by their environments, it can lead to increased asthma, neurological damage leading to disorders such as ADHD and autism, childhood obesity, cancer, and other issues. These health outcomes impact the child, the community, and our society as a whole for a host of reasons, including economic. Next slide. In California, preventable environmental hazards cost the state $254 million every year and $10 to $13 billion over the lifetime of all children born every year, according to the Public Health Institute. Lead exposures had the greatest overall financial impact of the four health conditions studied, and asthma had the greatest annual financial impact. For California specifically, the environment contributes up to 30% of childhood asthma burden and 15% of the childhood cancer burden. Next slide, please. All children are susceptible to negative outcomes as a result of environmental exposures, but they disproportionately affect minorities and children living below the poverty line. For example, asthma rates are up, Asthma rates are up to 50% higher among minority children. Children who have uncontrolled asthma have more disturbed sleep and have been shown to perform worse on concentration and memory tests, which affects classroom performance. Next slide, please. Black children are up to 5 times more likely to suffer from elevated blood lead levels than their white counterparts. And children from low-income communities are up to 4 times more likely to suffer from lead poisoning compared to moderate and upper-income children. A child with an empty stomach will absorb more lead, and nutritious foods help reduce lead absorption. So those without consistent access to nutritious food may be more susceptible to lead poisoning. Next slide. Regional Children's Environmental Health and Healthy Schools coordinators, like me, and the Office of Children's Health Protection, or OCHIP is the acronym, at EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C., offer a network of EPA staff that has experience working in and with communities to address children's environmental health issues and the impacts of these hazards. Coordinators provide technical assistance, education and training, and outreach to the public. And we also collaborate with other EPA programs and work with external organizations on research and other projects through partnership agreements, grants, and contracts. Next slide. When people hear children's environmental health, they often think that means we just work with children. In reality, we're focused on reaching anyone who has direct control or influence over environments where children live, learn, and play. This is a wide variety of people, such as those listed on the slide. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alali Banos-Keener, to talk more specifically about indoor air quality and asthma.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Aleli Banos-Keener. I'm the Indoor Air and Asthma Coordinator with EPA Region 9. I was having some technical difficulties this morning. Our internet went out in my area, so sorry to have to join over the phone. Okay, so we are going to talk a bit about asthma and the importance of indoor air. And I want to start by sharing this very true yet obvious statement about the air that we breathe. And it says, you could go days without food and hours without water, but you would last only a few minutes without air. We definitely tend to think about food and water many times in a single day. I know I do. But we don't think about the air that we're breathing much, especially the quality of the air that we breathe, especially indoors. Well, many of you who focus on air quality probably do think about the air quality many times a day, but I think you'll agree that as important as air quality is, most people don't think about it. The quality of the air we breathe makes a difference, of course, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the next few minutes. Also extremely important is what we can do to make our indoor air as safe as possible. I saw this statement here in an EPA document called the Plain English Guide to the Clean Air Act, and I added a link here. It gives a good non-technical explanation of the Clean Air Act for non-scientists like myself. Unfortunately, the document is only in English at the moment, but hopefully in the future it will be translated. Okay, next slide, please. So this is EPA's definition of what we mean when we talk about indoor air. We're referring to the air quality within and around buildings and structures, especially as it relates to the health and the comfort of occupants. These buildings and structures can be your home, your office, your child's daycare or school. It could technically be inside your car if you have long commutes. Whatever the indoor environment, understanding the relationship between outdoor and indoor air and controlling common pollutants indoors can help reduce the risk of suffering from health concerns caused by poor indoor air quality. Next slide, please. So EPA studies of indoor air show that it can be 2 to 5 times more polluted and sometimes up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air. And this makes sense since our indoor air is a combination of whatever is happening outside because outdoor air infiltrates indoors. And that outdoor air, along with the contaminants it brings in, mixes with whatever is happening inside your home. So if there's a wildfire outside or rush hour traffic, that air comes into your home, school, daycare, or office, and it combines with whatever is happening indoors. So perhaps there's cooking going on, or someone is using different products to clean, or perhaps scented personal care products are being used. There's also other things that may be happening that are undetected, like mold, maybe pests like roaches or mice. There could be dust mites or even new carpeting that's releasing volatile organic compounds into your indoor air. All of these things will affect our indoor air quality. Next slide, please. And we should be aware of what we breathe indoors because we spend most of our time indoors. Approximately 90% of our time we spend indoors. So to put this in perspective, it means that we tend to spend less than 2.5 hours a day on average outside. Poor indoor air quality affects everyone, but especially the most vulnerable. So the elderly, people with health vulnerabilities, and especially children, because they're still growing and their organs are still developing, as Sarah just mentioned. Also, their physiology makes them more susceptible to having lifelong effects from exposure to pollution. Next slide, please. Some of the health effects of indoor air pollution can be immediate, like triggering an asthma attack, irritating your eyes, your throat, your nose. It can cause headaches and fatigue, and it can even cause death in some extreme and very serious cases, such as with carbon monoxide exposure. Indoor air can also have long-term effects that can appear years after exposure. As you all probably know, when the National Ambient Air Quality Standards were established back in 1970, air pollution was regarded primarily as a threat to respiratory health. But over the decades, research on air pollution has shown that it's also linked to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, reproductive, neurological, and immune system disorders. I think the important takeaway is that indoor air affects your health, even if symptoms are not immediately noticeable. Next slide, please. So we're all very familiar with asthma. We either have it or have a child or spouse who has it, or we know of someone who has it. We have very high rates of asthma, and they seem to be increasing in most cases. If you're not familiar with asthma, an eye-opening exercise to simulate how an asthmatic feels is to plug your nose and try to breathe through a straw. This is how the narrowing of the airways feel to a person having an asthma attack. If you're going to try this exercise, they don't recommend that you do this for more than a minute, I believe, a minute or 2 minutes, because it actually could be dangerous. 25 million people in the US have asthma. That's 1 in 13 people. That's 8% of adults and 7% of children. Among people of color, American Indians and Alaska Natives have the highest rates at 12%. African Americans are at 10.9%, and Hispanics are at 6.4%. If you break down the Hispanic category, however, asthma prevalence is highest among people from Puerto Rico at 14%, compared to Mexican American at 6.4%, and Mexican at 4.4%. There's an interesting study going on. You all are probably aware of this. The University of Arizona researchers are looking at cross-border childhood asthma to compare children in Tucson with their peers in Nogales, Sonora. The study follows 500 pregnant women in both cities, and it tracks their newborn. It will track their newborns for approximately 5 years. The theory is that exposure to certain bacteria can actually strengthen your immune system. There is apparently 4 times less asthma in Nogales than in Tucson. So that'll be a very interesting study to follow. Next slide, please. So here's a partial list of indoor air pollutants and asthma triggers. Definitely not inclusive. It's all the room I had to add them in there. It's useful to be aware of and understand these sources of indoor air pollution so that you can control their impacts on your indoor air. And I'm just going to cover some of these. A lot of these pollutants are asthma triggers, but some are not. So radon, for example, is the first on the list here. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the US, excuse me, next to cigarette smoke. And it's silent because there's no smell or way of detecting it other than to test for it in your home. And EPA recommends that people test their home for radon. This can be done with a test kit that you can order online and send to a lab for analysis. I believe we've all heard, definitely by now, that chemical cleaning products will impact your indoor air. So minimizing the use of harsh cleaners will, as well as perfumes and scented products, will improve your indoor air quality. Bleach especially is an asthma trigger, as well as an asthmagen, which means that it has been proven to cause asthma in people with prolonged exposure. There's an EPA program called Safer Choice that lists recommended cleaning products. And Sarah's going to talk a lot more about this in the next few slides. Pesticides, avoid using pesticides inside your home. Look into a program called Integrated Pest Management instead, which looks at ways to control pests before you choose to use pesticides, bug sprays, or bug bombs. Instead of looking into, instead look into eliminating their source of food and water and closing off any entry points into your indoor space. Road traffic is the principal outdoor source of nitrogen dioxide. The most important indoor sources include tobacco smoke and gas, wood, oil, kerosene, and coal burning appliances such as stoves, ovens, space heaters, water heaters, and fireplaces, especially if they don't have proper exhaust outlets or are poorly maintained. Carbon monoxide indoors is also another source of indoor air pollution. It can also come from unvented appliances, kerosene and gas space heaters, leaky chimneys and furnaces, gas stoves, and exhaust from vehicles if you have a garage attached to your home or from nearby roads or parking areas. During power outages, people start using portable generators incorrectly, either inside their home, which can kill you in minutes, or too close to their homes. And the exhaust from those portable generators can get inside the home and, of course, affect your indoor air quality and your health. I know we all talk about PM a lot, but there's a lot of indoor sources of PM as well. Combustion appliances like wood stoves, space heaters, kerosene heaters, and fireplaces. But I found it very surprising that cooking also releases a lot of particulate matter indoors. So whenever you're cooking with high heat, frying, browning, toasting, charring, broiling, all of those activities release a lot of PM into your indoor environment. Also burning anything indoors, like candles, for example. So to remedy this, of course, make sure that your appliances are vented properly to the outside of your home, and always turn on your stove vent fan or hood if you have one. And if you don't have a stove vent or hood, open your windows, open your doors, ventilate as much as possible when any sort of cooking is going on. Biological pollutants. These are examples of some of these are bacteria, viruses, animal dander, house dust, roach, and pollen. Of course, this past year and a half, the importance of indoor air quality related to COVID has been very, very evident to all of us. Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about ventilation and filtration and how important it is to help mitigate the impacts of an indoor air virus, whether it's COVID or something else in the future. And then the last couple ones, people with asthma have inflamed airways that make them sensitive to things that may not bother other people. And weather can also be an asthma trigger. Extreme temperatures, hot and cold, can aggravate airways. Humid weather can do that as well. And in addition, humidity can also make air quality worse by increasing levels of mold and dust mites indoors. Okay, next slide, please. So the good news about asthma is that according to doctors and medical professionals, asthma can be controlled by doing the following three things. Precise use of medication and constant communication with your medical provider. There are a lot of different medications out there that are available. So if a person is using a certain medication and it's not working for them, they can contact their medical provider. There's a lot of different medications that can be used and combinations of medications. And making sure that you're using the medication at the right time is also very important. There's an asthma management plan that you can download. If you Google asthma management plan, it'll come up, and it's very important that you have one ready. If you have children with asthma, that you make sure that their childcare provider, their school, their teacher, their coach, everybody who's around your child has a copy and is familiar with their asthma management plan. It talks about all the different triggers and all the different signs of an oncoming asthma exacerbation. That's also very important. And then, of course, identification and avoidance of asthma triggers is another very important key things that will assist in controlling asthma and keeping people out of hospitals. And I think that is it for me. I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to talk about ventilation and filtration.
Thank you, Alali. So another key environmental health topic for children that's very important and top of mind right now is the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 symptoms can be more severe for those with pre-existing respiratory and other conditions, such as asthma. As research on the pandemic has progressed, we've learned more and more about SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, and how it's transmitted. Early research suggested transmission from surfaces was a significant concern, but newer research from CDC now indicates that airborne is the primary way the virus is transmitted. The virus is transmitted primarily in droplets and aerosols. Droplets are heavier and fall to the ground more quickly. Aerosols are lighter and can travel farther and last longer in the air than droplets. In order to reduce the spread of infection, the best approach is to use a combination of different strategies known as the layered risk reduction approach. I'm going to talk more about ventilation, filtration, and disinfection in particular, but it's important to continue all of these practices to mitigate risk. Next slide, please. We have just a short time together today, so I'm going to talk just very briefly about some basics on ventilation and filtration and some best practices. At the end of our presentation, we have some resources where you can learn more. And all of these practices relate both to the COVID-19 pandemic and to improving indoor air quality in general. Ventilation is an important way to remove particles from the air, including airborne viruses. Both mechanical and passive ventilation provide fresh air by diluting and removing some or all infectious airborne microbes. Mechanical ventilation uses the building's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems that are known as HVAC. Buildings both with and without HVAC systems also rely on passive ventilation, which means opening doors and windows. Ventilation often refers to air exchanges per hour, a rate that calculates how often the volume of air in a given room is replaced by new air. There currently isn't a standard for air exchanges per hour, but 5 total exchanges per hour or greater is recommended by some experts to achieve excellent ventilation. Harvard and the University of Colorado created an air exchange calculator you can use to estimate the air exchanges per hour in a given space. Another way to measure ventilation is to use carbon dioxide parts per million. The state of California recently, I think it was October of 2020, passed a law on measuring carbon dioxide parts per million in school classrooms and requiring those measurements. So that is in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but is a really good way of estimating the ventilation in a classroom. Next slide, please. Filtration is another way to improve the indoor air quality and lower the risk of transmitting airborne disease. Minimum efficiency reporting values, or MERV, reports a filter's ability to capture particles. Filters with MERV 13 or higher ratings can trap smaller particles, including viruses. Upgrading to a MERV 13 rated filter or the highest filter that your HVAC system, fan, and filter slot can accommodate could improve the system's efficacy in removing viruses from circulated air. But not all HVAC systems can support a higher MERV rating. So before making any changes to air filters in an HVAC system, you should consult an HVAC professional. A 2020 report by the US Government Accountability Office estimates that 41% of school districts need to update or replace the HVAC systems in at least half of their schools. That's about 36,000 schools that require an update or replacement. So it's really important to see how many places need to make these improvements in order to really ensure that indoor air quality is good. It's also very important to ensure that the HVAC filter is correctly in place, or the air could come in around it and not be filtered. Also consider running the system fan for longer times or continuously, because HVAC systems only filter the air when the fan is running. Many systems can be set to run the fan even if no heating or cooling is taking place. Another measure that will help is opening the outside air intake if your system has one. Bringing in outside air through the system rather than through windows and doors will ensure it passes through the filter. If you rely on opening doors and windows, it may also unbalance the HVAC system and possibly have other unforeseen consequences. But it's still important that if you feel like you do need to open doors and windows, either based on carbon dioxide or other measurements, or feeling like there isn't enough ventilation, it's important to continue to do that. Portable air filters or air cleaners are an effective way to filter. Oh, sorry, that's the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Portable air filters or air cleaners are an effective way to filter air in an individual room, especially if HVAC systems are inadequate or you don't have one. There are no standards for testing or rating portable air filters, but there are criteria to look for to ensure you're using the safest and best filter for your space. First, you want a true HEPA filter. Some air cleaners also include an activated charcoal filter, but that's primarily for gaseous pollutants. So what you really want to make sure you have is a HEPA filter to capture particles. It's also important to check the clean air delivery rate and the room size the unit can filter. Electronic air cleaners that use ionization or emit ozone are not recommended, as those can contribute to poor air quality, even though their goal is to improve the air quality. The California Air Resources Board maintains a list of air cleaners that meet their criteria for safety that's linked here. Portable air cleaners can be expensive, but a fairly inexpensive approach is to create a portable air cleaner using a regular box fan and a MERV 13 filter you can buy at the hardware store. EPA has been conducting research on both the safety and efficacy of these do-it-yourself filters, which you can read more about on EPA's website. Next slide, please. So much of the guidance around air quality for COVID-19 involves bringing in outside air. But for those of us who live in California, we know, and other parts of the US and the world, we know that the outside air quality might be poor from wildfires, from vehicle exhaust, or other sources. Also, what if the temperature outside is extremely cold or hot? Poor outdoor air quality and temperature differences can make it very hard to safely ventilate. So that's why it's important to use both ventilation and filtration in partnership. If the outdoor air quality is poor, you should close outdoor intakes for your HVAC system if possible, and keep windows and doors closed. In this case, you'll rely more on filtration, and you should use airnow.gov, and there are some other resources as well, to check the air quality index in your area to determine how safe the outdoor air quality is. I think probably most, if not all of you, are familiar with airnow.gov as a resource. This overview is really short on ventilation and filtration and doesn't cover all of the challenges communities have and individual situations. Challenges like managing the noise level in a classroom or workspace, keeping costs down, or even whether the control of an HVAC system in a school or a building is with someone at that building, or maybe it's a contractor somewhere else. So we realize that it takes a lot of choices and compromise when it comes to keeping indoor air quality safe and healthy. And some of those are judgment calls that come with time and experience. But hopefully the resources we have in this presentation will help you make some of those difficult choices. Next slide, please. I want to touch just briefly on the disinfection portion of the layered risk reduction approach, especially as it relates to air quality. We mentioned that research shows that the risk of transmission from surfaces is low, but people continue to use, overuse, and misuse cleaners and disinfectants. Many products used to clean, sanitize, and disinfect contain toxic chemicals. Disinfectant residues left on a surface can become airborne and inhaled. Some health effects from these products are immediate, like an asthma attack or eye and skin irritation, but some health effects may not show up for years or even decades, like cancer, reproductive disorders, or central nervous system impairment. Aerosol disinfectant sales from Reckitt Benckiser went up over 100% in 2020. We've also seen a large increase in poison control calls to report exposures due to cleaning and disinfectant products. People, especially early in the pandemic, who were unable to find the products that they regularly used, ended up mixing their own, resulting in toxic gases that can severely harm or even kill. So the best practice, never mix products unless the product label specifically tells you how. Alali touched on bleach, but bleach has intense fumes that can exacerbate or even potentially cause asthma. Children are at greater risk from breathing bleach vapors because their lungs are still developing. So unless there's a really specific need for it, bleach is best avoided. If you're going to use it, like all disinfectant products, please make sure you have the appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, to protect yourself and anyone around you. Next slide, please. EPA has 2 programs that can help you find the best products for you, for home and for school, and for medical facilities as well. Alali mentioned the Safer Choice program, that's for cleaning products, and the Design for the Environment program is for disinfectants. You can use these websites to search for the right products, including those that are fragrance-free for chemically sensitive people, such as those with asthma. Look for the label on the products where you regularly buy your cleaning and disinfecting supplies. You should always make sure the products you're using are meant for your setting, whether that's home, school, or medical facility. Always, always, always follow the label instructions and make sure the space you're cleaning and disinfecting is well ventilated. To further limit the amount of product in the air, you can spray product in a stream on a microfiber towel and then apply that to surfaces rather than spraying the surface. Next slide, please. I want to take just a minute to talk more specifically about wipes. Disposable wipes may look similar, but they come in very different forms designed for very different uses and cannot be used interchangeably. So a quick example on that, A on the slide is an EPA registered surface sanitizing wipe that can be used on food contact surfaces, which are meant for killing bacteria, not viruses. B is an EPA registered disinfectant wipe for non-food contact surfaces for killing both bacteria and viruses. Each of these have different dwell or contact times. The first one is 30 seconds wet on the surface. The second one is 4 minutes wet on the surface. C is an FDA regulated hand sanitizing wipe, which are not designed for cleaning surfaces, just for wiping your hands. But what all of these do have in common is all 3 products have a keep out of reach of children warning. Next slide, please. This is another good example. Both products on this slide are labeled as alcohol wipes, but the product on the left is an EPA regulated disinfectant for surfaces, and the product on the right is a FDA regulated hand wipe product. So it's really important to look carefully at what you're buying and using and ensure you're following the directions and using them correctly. Next slide, please. Devices meant for combating COVID-19, such as electrostatic sprayers, foggers, misters, and other emerging technology are often a source of questions that we get. So I want to provide just a little bit more information on those. First, it's important to know about the regulatory differences between chemical disinfectants and devices. EPA cannot confirm whether or under what circumstances these products might be effective against SARS-CoV-2. EPA doesn't license these devices. We register chemical disinfectants, which are pesticides. We don't verify the disinfection claims of device manufacturers. These devices are only regulated in that they can't make false or misleading claims about the effectiveness or safety of their devices. If a manufacturer is making claims about a device, they should have scientific data to support the claims. So if you decide to use these devices, make sure you're reviewing the efficacy data and safety data to decide if the device will work for your purposes. We really know very little about these emerging technologies, and there are others that are not on the list here. And there may be currently unknown health risks. Many of these devices increase the amount of chemicals in the air during application. So that's an important indoor air quality consideration. There's really no magic bullet. So back to that slide where we talked about the layered risk reduction approach, the multi-strategy approach is really the best way to go. Next slide, please. EPA has a really great resource guidance document with simple information for safely cleaning and disinfecting. Like the guidance in the rest of the presentation, these are best practices for every day, not just for the pandemic. I want to mention just briefly a couple of highlights from the guidance. In most situations, cleaning is enough to reduce the risk of disease from touching surfaces. Never apply disinfectants to skin, pets, or food. We mentioned this, but don't dilute disinfectants or mix them with other chemicals. Always follow the label instructions. And this is a big one. Children should not apply disinfectants. This often surprises people when I talk about it. You should not be asking children to use disinfectants, including wipes. Sometimes schools, for example, ask students to clean their workspaces. As we've discussed, children are still growing and developing. So a chemical exposure that may not have an effect on an adult can have long-term impacts on a child. And I don't just mean young children. I don't just mean kindergartners shouldn't be disinfecting their spaces. The Office of Children's Health Protection at EPA defines children through the age of 21. So please don't ask students to use these products. I'm going to turn it back over to Aleli. I know we're about at time here. Just to quickly run through some resources that we have for you in this presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, just going to take a couple of minutes to share a few resources with everyone. Here is a landing page for the Children's Environmental Health and Healthy Schools. We invite you to visit these pages. They have a variety of resources and information for protecting children from environmental hazards where they live, learn, and play. Unfortunately, at this time, these websites are only in English, but we also linked some sites that are in Spanish, and we're working on having some of these pages translated into Spanish as well. Next slide, please. And this slide is in English, but the following one is in Spanish. In addition to Children's Environmental Health Resources from EPA, this is an important partner that we work very closely with, the Western States Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Units, or PESU for short. The acronym is a little challenging. They have a variety of valuable resources developed by physicians. They also have a PESU University with actual courses that medical staff can take to learn about environmental health topics and also meet their continuing education requirements. So that's definitely something to share with our medical professionals. The PESU is in Region 9, and they work with over 100 physicians that provide education and consultation to healthcare providers, parents, and public health officials about exposures and potential effects. Next slide, please. We shared a PDF of these slides with the meeting organizers to share with everyone, and I encourage you to check out these additional resources linked here in the document as well. And I won't go into it, but there's a lot of great information here. Just a couple plugs: the EPA Indoor Air Quality in Schools link, the very first link that you see here, has a lot of great recorded webinars from professionals talking about in depth about some of the topics that we just briefly covered today. So that is also a great resource to look into. And next slide, please. Just additional resources here on additional information on safer disinfecting, and also some resources in Spanish as well. And I think that does it for us. So we are open to any questions.
Thank you, Sarah and Aleli, for the very informative presentation. I definitely learned a lot. And we will definitely share the PDF of the presentation to everyone who registered to the meeting after the meeting today. But right now, I just wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any questions. You can raise your hand using the Zoom function or add your question to the chat.
If you do have additional questions that you or things you would like to follow up on, opportunities for engagement on these topics, our contact information is on the next slide, but I'll put it in the chat as well. Anyone in the chat, in the absence of filters, increasing outdoor air indoors can result in more polluted indoor air in disadvantaged communities. But of course, I agree that ventilation is critical to control COVID-19 and indoor air pollutants. What resources are available for community members to fund air filtration? That's a really good question. I don't know. So I think it depends on the setting. I know for schools, the American Rescue Plan has funding available for HVAC system upgrades. In terms of additional funding resources for communities, Aleli, I don't know if you have anything else that comes to mind.
For communities like homes, no, that's a good question that we can look into. I know that, we talked about the do-it-yourself air filtration devices. Those may only filter like particulate matter, so those may not be effective. But yeah, I definitely see the concern in some communities, and definitely would look into the American Rescue Plan funding to see if there's anything else available that might actually, help with COVID and also with that issue of poor air quality outdoors coming into homes. I'll be on the lookout as well. And I'm not sure who asked the question, but maybe we can follow up with that person and do a little bit of research.
Absolutely. I saw a hand up. Domingo?
Hi, yes, Sarah, thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation, both to you and Aleli. It was a great presentation, great information. I just wanted to quickly share that APCD has been working with the Portside community in San Diego, which includes Sherman Heights, Logan Heights, Barrio Logan, and West National City to develop this community emissions reduction plan. And as part of that effort, we are providing indoor air filtration systems for members of that community. And that program is part of a larger community air protection program that we're also trying to expand to the border community in 2022. So there could be additional opportunities coming to the border area through the program if we're able to expand it next year. So just wanted to put that in on people's radars.
Thank you, Domingo. I see one more question. I know we've got another presentation too in the chat. Are there other actions that can be carried out to improve air quality in addition to the use of a filter? I can touch on that briefly and then ask if Ali has anything to add. That slide about all of the different asthma triggers and some of the other things that contribute to negative indoor air quality, removing those as much as you can. So if there's mold in your home, making sure that gets cleaned up correctly, dust as well, cooking, Ali mentioned, making sure you turn on the exhaust fan. Some fans only recirculate the air inside the home. So if you are able to have an exhaust fan that pulls the cooking exhaust outside, that's a really good one. So definitely some little things that you can do behavior-wise. And then for cleaning products, fragrance-free products, safer choice products, that's going to definitely keep the indoor air quality better. Ali, anything else to add?
No, I think you explained it really well. I guess the only thing I would add is that, that's why I spent a little bit of time on the indoor air pollutants, because sometimes those are the only things that we can control, and try to make those improvements to our indoor air quality. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But the only other thing I wanted to say is that sometimes when people live in multi-unit housing, it's also very difficult to control what is coming into your unit, whether it be secondhand smoke or other smells that maybe you can't identify, or maybe you have somebody who cooks a ton and you live right upstairs and the smells are coming into your unit. So just trying to do as much as you can to minimize what you're generating inside your unit, making sure that you're ventilating as much as possible, just being aware of the things that you can do in your own space, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one additional plug to get your home tested for radon. There are cheap or even free kits that you can do to test your living space for radon. Chuya, I don't know if we have time for Ryan's hand is up. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, Ryan, feel free to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Chuy and Stephanie. This is Ryan Atencio with the California Resources Board. I was just going to add it into the chat in response to Dr. Quintana's question about funding in addition to the AB 617 program that Domingo mentioned that's implemented in Portside and then being proposed for San Isidro. There's another CARB program that the Enforcement Division runs called the Supplemental Environmental Project Program, where groups and community can propose a project, and then when there's a violator that's penalized, there's a chance that that project can get funded if there's a nexus to that violation. So I'm going to put the link there for just to address that question. It's general funding, or in general, not specifically for air filtration, but I'll place that in there. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you all so much for having us. Again, I'll put our contact information in the chat, and we look forward to further conversation.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah and Lily. So moving along, we're gonna start our roundtable updates with updates from our partner agencies. To start it off, I wanted to pass it on to Domingo from the San Diego Air Pollution Control District.
Gracias, Chuy. Thank you, Chuy, very much. Just a quick announcement, and this is related to the program I was talking about a little bit earlier, the Community Emissions Reduction, the Community Air Protection Program. We recently had the California Air Resources Board approve our community emissions reduction plan for the Portside community. And this is a very important milestone because it's allowing us to implement a number of actions and work collaboratively with many other agencies in the region to work on reducing air quality impacts to the Portside community. And again, this is part of a larger statewide program that works with disadvantaged communities and environmental justice communities across the state. And it brings together not just the air agencies, but also other jurisdictions and other regional agencies to find solutions. And something of relevance for this group is that we submitted a couple of years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, probably, we submitted a nomination for the border community to also be selected for that program. And we are currently working with our colleagues at CARB to have that nomination be considered again in this next round for communities that would be selected in 2022. In the coming months, we will be reaching out to interested stakeholders in the border area to start coordinating letters of support and to pick up the conversation again on this important program and see how we can support the border area to be selected for it as well. So more to come on that, and there's work in the background already happening so that the border area is selected. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Domingo. Moving along, I wanted to give the mic to Benjamin Gibson and Daniel Lopez Vicuña, who are going to give an update on the Border 2025 structure.
Hola, Chuy, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, sí.
Gracias. Muy buenos días. Bueno, vamos a dar un breve reporte de lo que hemos estado trabajando la EPA y Semarnat. Mi nombre es Daniel López Vicuña. Quizás algunos y algunas ya nos hemos visto por aquí, aunque sea virtualmente. Yo estoy como director de calidad del aire en Semarnat y en un momento mi colega Benjamin Gibson les estará presentando lo que hemos estado trabajando para que este tipo de reuniones, el grupo de trabajo que se junta para la calidad del aire de San Diego-Tijuana y todos los demás que tenemos en la frontera, sigan sus trabajos y continúen mejorando y incluyendo a más gente. Dejo el micrófono a Benjamin Gibson para que nos apoye con esa presentación. Adelante, Ben.
Thank you, Danielle. Good to be with you all today. I know I've met many of you before. Just a quick refresher of where I sit for those of you particularly who haven't met me before. So I work in the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards for US EPA, and we're located in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And I'm in the Climate International and Multimedia Group. This part of my work is frankly probably my favorite, and I think it's really terrific, and I'm really excited that Border 2025 has finally kicked off this year. I know there was a bit of a delay, so really thrilled that it's getting off the ground, and also really a pleasure to work with Danielle and have been doing so now for almost a couple of years. In terms of our roles, so I'm one of the co-chairs for the Air Policy Work Group that used to be called the Air Policy Forum. And so now as an Air Policy Work Group, we're really the kind of federal headquarters, zoomed out view of things, if you will. So our role is really to try and connect the dots between different regions to keep a border-wide view of things that are happening and looking for opportunities to fill gaps or lend support where we can, given what resources or expertise may be housed in our respective offices. And so just wanted to share this one slide just to give a very simplified picture of how the coordinating bodies for Border 2025 will be interacting, showing that the regional coordinators will have the lead on developing action plans, but we would love to have a collaborative role in that development process, and also tracking the action plans as we move through the program, and not so much tracking as Big Brother, but tracking as someone who can hopefully lend help and lend support where it's needed, or where there are gaps in some of the objectives that we're trying to achieve as part of Border 2025. Also notable in this particular diagram, you'll note with respect to the action plans and what's shown here, critically, local partners are not shown in this diagram, but they're absolutely instrumental in the work that we hope to do. And the North American Development Bank, also not shown here, also critical for kind of the financial structure of Border 2025. So this is just to give a quick flavor, and we just wanted to introduce ourselves and let you know that Daniel and I will be working diligently to try and support the objectives of Border 2025, and we hope to be reaching out to the regional coordinators soon so that we can connect on the action plans as they're being developed, and come to a path forward jointly over the course of the coming years. So that's all we wanted to share. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Benjamin and Daniel. We'll hold off questions until our roundtable updates are done, but definitely encourage folks to have questions in mind if you have any. Moving along, I'm passing the mic to Mario Zuniga, who will be giving general updates from US EPA.
Thank you, Joey. So good morning, everyone. My name is Mario Zuniga, and I'm the San Diego-Tijuana Air Quality Task Force Liaison here in EPA Region 9, based in San Diego. So I'll be providing information on a few funding opportunities and activities going on here in Region 9, and other things. So next slide, please. Okay, so for the first kind of funding opportunities, the school bus replacement rebates. So for this one, there are 2 rebate programs available to reduce emissions from older, dirtier diesel school buses. The first one here is the 2021 DERA school bus rebate, which is open to all public school districts and private fleets serving those schools for replacements to cleaner buses that meet current emission standards. The second opportunity here is the American Rescue Plan electric school bus rebate, which has a targeted eligibility to a list of underserved school districts, tribal schools, and private fleets serving those schools. And for this rebate program, the replacement buses must be solely operated on battery electric power. So since this one has a target eligibility list, I'll include the link to the list in the chat for a list of that one. But I did want to highlight that for both of these programs, the deadline to apply is on November 5th, and an eligible entity, an entity that's eligible for both programs may apply to both, but cannot use the funding from both programs for the same bus replacement. Next slide, please. So we're also providing updates on the air quality program, which aims to raise awareness about the local air quality. So each participating organization that is involved in the air quality program that will raise a flag that corresponds to how clean or polluted the air is. The color of the flag matches the EPA Air Quality Index, which will be green, yellow, orange, red, and purple. So on unhealthy days, the organization can use this information to adjust physical activities to help reduce exposure to air pollution while still keeping people active. So as part of the fall challenge, we have good news for organizations that want to get involved in implementing the flag program. We're actually giving out free flag sets to participations that want to, or organizations that want to participate, to have more flags flying in California, Nevada, Arizona, the Pacific Islands, and the tribal nations. So I'll see if I can attach a PDF that has more information, or let me see if I'm not able to do it, perhaps one of the meeting organizers can help me attach it. But yeah, so we'll be sending more information on this program for folks that want to apply for this, to get a free set of the flags. Next slide, please. So in observance of Children's Health Month, EPA Region 9 is holding a social media challenge to highlight organizations that communicate the local air quality with their community. So if you want to participate in the social media challenge, just post a photo of your organization raising your air quality flag or spreading air quality awareness in any other creative way. Tag us EPA at EPA Region 9 and add the hashtag Air Quality Flag Program. And then from that, EPA may select a few participants' posts to feature in our Region 9 newsletter or our Air Quality Flag Program newsletters. Also, if your program or if your organization would like to receive an Air Quality Flag Program social media challenge participation certificate from Region 9, you can contact Idalia Perez and send her a screenshot of your post before the end of the social media challenge, which ends on Friday, November 5th. And so you can also contact Idalia if you have any other questions regarding the Air Quality Flag Program, the Fall Challenge, or the social media challenge. Next slide, please. Oh, and I see that they included the PDF for more information on the how to obtain the free flag set there in the chat. So for this slide, we have the Commission of Environmental Cooperation is currently accepting proposals for the EJ for Climate Grant, which is aimed to support underserved and vulnerable communities and indigenous communities in Canada, Mexico, and the United States to improve their capacity to prepare for, withstand, respond to, and recover from hazardous events or disturbances related to climate change. So there you have a list of the eligible organizations. One thing I wanted to highlight from this, or mention actually, is that universities and academic and public research institutions are actually eligible to apply if they team up with a community-based organization or any of the organizations listed there. And the deadline for this grant proposals is on November 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And for more information, you can access the link there on the slide. Next slide, please. So for this one, EPA is accepting applications for the environmental education local grants. The purpose for this grant is to support locally focused environmental education programs that increase public awareness and knowledge about environmental issues and provide the skills that participants need to make informed decisions and take responsible actions towards the environment. Eligible applicants include any US located local education agencies, colleges, or universities, as well as state education or environmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, or non-commercial educational broadcasting entities. One thing to note is that projects in Canada and Mexico may be eligible if the applicant organization is located in the United States or one of its territories, and the majority of the educational activities take place in the United States, or they can also take place in the United States and Mexico. And the deadline for applications for this one is December 6th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And you can as well get more information by accessing the link there. Next slide, please. All right, so last but not least, we have a quick update on the Border 2025 funding through NatBank. There were a total of 8 proposals pre-selected for funding in Region 9. And out of those proposals, there are 5 that were pre-selected in the Baja California region. Under Goal 1, the Air and Health Surveillance System in Mexicali and Perro Valley by the Baja California Secretary of Public Health was pre-selected. And there we have a list of, the list of the other 3 proposals under Goal 3 and 1 proposal under Goal 4. So for this one, there'll be a press release and more details shared next week. But if you have any questions, you can also contact Lorena Lopez Powers at her email address there. And next slide, please. So if you want to contact us here at EPA for anything regarding the border program, you can contact any of the folks listed here in this slide. You may contact me for any matters related to the San Diego-Tijuana Air Quality Task Force. Idale Perez is our Border Air Program Coordinator, or you may also contact Ben, he's the border team lead at OEQPS in our headquarters office. And that is it for me. Thank you, Chuy.
Thank you, Mario, for all those updates. I wanted to see if anybody else, any other partner agencies had any updates to share before we open it up to public comment and discussion. See a hand up from Ryan at CARB.
Sí.
Oh, y Saúl.
Adelante, Saul. I can go after Saul, Chuy. Thank you.
Gracias. Yo solamente quisiera, en este espacio que nos permiten, quisiera aprovechar para comentar que dentro del plan de acción que se tiene convenido en este nuevo programa Frontera 2025, tenemos por lo menos 2 acciones comprometidas. Una que es el monitoreo de la calidad del aire, de lo cual lo que podemos informarles es que no logramos que aunque quedaron programados recursos económicos para adquisición de equipos nuevos para por lo menos 2 estaciones adicionales, no fue posible liberar estos recursos y no pudimos adquirirlos. Entonces, más o menos el esquema de monitoreo de calidad del aire lo mantenemos igual con 5 estaciones, 3 en Mexicali, 2 en Tijuana. También opera la de Tecate, sin embargo, no comunica datos continuamente y no opera todos los parámetros. Por otro lado, también informar que el otro proyecto que está contemplado en el plan de acción es la verificación vehicular, y para eso ya se publicó de nueva cuenta el programa oficial de verificación vehicular ahora en septiembre, y bueno, estamos con el proyecto casi a punto de arrancar. Será quizá la siguiente semana, pero el compromiso entonces es que para cumplir con el plan de acción se mantienen estos 2 programas que tenemos comprometidos, por lo menos estos 2. Y también reconocer, como lo informaba hace unos momentos Mario Zúñiga, que estamos contentos con este apoyo que se recibió de las solicitudes de subvención para este estudio y seguimiento epidemiológico que seguirá la Secretaría de Salud del Estado. Seguimiento epidemiológico en cuestión de las afectaciones epidemiológicas por exposición a contaminantes. Esa parte casi nunca se ha hecho aquí en la parte mexicana o la parte fronteriza mexicana. Por lo tanto, va a ser un estudio importante que nos va a poder aportar información para poder identificar cuál es la contribución de los contaminantes hacia los efectos de la salud. En el diseño de la propuesta está contemplado hacer seguimiento a las unidades médicas de todos los niveles para que registren los sucesos o los eventos de personas que acuden a la consulta médica en que tengan asociación con cuestiones de exposición de contaminantes. Por cuestiones oficiales, no todas las enfermedades o no todos los síntomas se registran, por lo tanto, estamos contentos de que este estudio va a adelantar un poco al registro de incidencias de contaminación y salud. Y bueno, eso es lo que quería adelantar en este esquema y bueno, esperando que tengo por el momento. Gracias.
Gracias, Saul. Ryan, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chuy, and thank you, co-presidents Saul and Domingo. This is Ryan Atencio with the California Resources Board. So I'm our Border Affairs Coordinator here at CARB, and I just wanted to mention really quickly a couple of projects in the Tijuana-San Diego border region that we're working on. Number one, we are working with the city of Tijuana currently to set up a 50 low-cost sensor network that was funded by US EPA. And so I'm working, I think one of my counterparts is on the line, Licenciado Carrasco from the municipality of Tijuana. So I've been working with him, and the MOU was executed actually September the 24th between CARB and the city. And so we're working to deliver those machines to the city. So that's one piece I wanted to mention to update this table. A second piece was that CARB was also funded by the US EPA to do a study of the inventory model moves Mexico. And so right now CARB is working with a contractor to implement this project to update the fleet characteristics for the fleet, primarily light duty, but I believe some heavy duty will be captured in Mexicali, Tijuana, and Tecate in order to improve that model for our inputs. And so the project focuses on things like collecting the year, make, model, and emission factor of vehicles. And so in order to update the border fleet. So we're expecting to do and conduct field work in Mexico within the next couple of months. And so to that end, if Saul or my counterparts in any of the municipalities in Tijuana, in this case, have any questions, please feel free, happy to coordinate. But I believe the contractors and the project manager are already coordinating with you on that. Additionally, there's a project that I wanted to mention that CARB is spearheading in San Isidro for diesel monitoring. This was a more recent funded project from US EPA to establish a low-cost sensor network to measure oxides of nitrogen and particulate matter and black carbon in San Isidro. So particularly to give notice to the table for folks like Domingo, David Soderman, and other stakeholders and from that side. So we'll be looking to focus on diesel emissions. And one of the primary goals is to establish a low-cost sensor monitoring network to measure these parameters. But additionally, we'd like to collect, store, and display that through CARB's website, those data. And additionally, we'd be collaborating with community groups and the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. So more on that, happy to speak more on that if there's questions. And then lastly, just to mention that on September the 20th, I think obviously Domingo and other folks that were in attendance know that the US consulate in Tijuana did a ribbon cutting ceremony, a green ribbon cutting ceremony for the deployment of an air monitor at the consulate there, a Teledyne T640, so it does PM 2.5. I mentioned this because CARB, this was a San Diego County and US EPA project, but CARB was in attendance. I mention it because with the advent of this regulatory grade monitor and the sensor network that we're working with the city of Tijuana and potentially in San Isidro, there's a potential there for co-location of these low-cost sensors with that monitor. And so we'd be working with the consulate staff and US EPA and San Diego and the municipality of Tijuana to the extent that they are amenable, and to conduct co-location in order to check and have a check on the low-cost monitoring networks that we're planning. So those are the updates from CARB. Happy to speak more at any time on those. Thank you, Chuy. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ryan. For sake of time, I think it'd be best to just not move folks into panelist mode and just have folks raise their hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask your question over Zoom. I did want to flag that there are 2 questions in the chat right now. One for Mario around the Border 2025 funding. If you'd like to address that.
Yeah, I see the question. So thank you for the question, Jenny Quintana. So I think we have Lorena Lopez Powers here, and she's the one that kind of helped us coordinate that Border 2025 funding. So Lorena, I don't know if you can perhaps unmute yourself and address the question from Jenny Quintana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I have to apologize. I'm not sure if I heard the question or if it's in the chat. I have not read it. I'm assuming it's in regards to the RFP and the.
Yes. So here, I'll repeat the question. So the question is, so it starts with the Border 2025 funding seems a bit lower than previous years. The total funding was lower per award, and you seem to have selected fewer proposals. Is this a correct impression?
Thank you, Jenny. It's good to hear from you. Actually, yes. Unfortunately, the funds were more limited under this funding opportunity under Board 2025, and that we propose to work closely with our partners and our community stakeholders as we implement the program. But yes, unfortunately, funding was a little more limited under this cycle. And again, we'll be tracking closely the open commitments we've made under the program to make sure that we address them within the 5-year program that we have committed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Lorena. Moving along, Saúl, hay una pregunta en el chat que pregunta sobre el cambio de gobierno estatal. ¿Cuáles son los temas prioritarios que deberá atender la nueva administración y cuál es el presupuesto asignado?
Gracias, Chuy. Fíjense que esa es una pregunta difícil de contestar por dos razones. La primera es que durante estos 2 años hemos insistido en muchos temas prioritarios. Por ejemplo, el monitoreo de calidad del aire es uno, atender la cuestión de manejo de residuos es otro, atender el tema de cambio climático, conservar los recursos naturales desde la Sierra San Pedro Mártir hasta el paralelo 28 en todo el estado. Hay varios temas que hemos insistido en que son prioritarios y deben tener presupuesto para poder operar programas y para poder lograr metas. Lamentablemente, pues no hemos tenido mucha respuesta desde la oficina ambiental, no hemos tenido mucha respuesta con apoyo presupuestal. Y particularmente en el diseño del presupuesto para el siguiente año, no nos han convocado, no hemos participado en el diseño del nuevo presupuesto, entonces no podría decir que tenemos perfilado ya como un presupuesto. Lo que podría decir es que hicimos una lista de temas de máximo interés y gestionamos incluso ante el Congreso del Estado que se active el Fondo Ambiental poniendo muchos temas que pueden ser prioritarios y también financiables desde muchas esferas, particularmente nuestra subsecretaría o la parte regulatoria y de programas que tenemos en el Estado genera muchos recursos a través de trámites, permisos, etcétera, etcétera. Y entonces hay una buena cantidad de recursos que podrían ser utilizados. Sin embargo, pues cuando se prioriza el presupuesto, pues lo ambiental no recibe en proporción lo que nosotros consideramos sería prioritario. Entonces, pues no tenemos ahorita una respuesta para poder decir cómo la nueva administración está viendo las prioridades que nosotros hemos enlistado. Va a ser cuestión de que esta nueva administración, que ya empieza en unos días más, pues lo pueda anunciar y ojalá que puedan priorizar todas estas necesidades que son muy básicas, muy apremiantes, porque hay efectos de las actividades en general que tienen mucho costo en salud y ambiente para todos. Salud de las personas, salud de los ecosistemas, salud de los recursos naturales, etcétera, etcétera. Espero contestar en parte la pregunta y también yo tengo algunas dudas al respecto. Gracias.
Gracias, Saul. Thank you, Saul. Doing a quick time check, we are at time for the end of the meeting. So I wanted to move ahead to close out the meeting. For next steps, I will be sending along the contact list for folks in the meeting that said that they would like to share their contact information so folks can follow up with questions. I'm also going to send along the presentation on children's health and air quality, as well as the recording link to this presentation. Thank you everybody so much for your engagement. There's a lot of information, so I'll be sure to send that recording as well. I wanted to hand it off to Domingo and Saul for some closing remarks.
Gracias, Chuy. Thank you very much, Chuy. I just wanted to thank everybody again for their participation today, and our panelists, our presenters, for the great information that was shared, especially in the context of Children's Health Month, this month of October. Very relevant information, very important. And I encourage anybody that has any topics that would like to, to have discussed in this forum, to send us an email, send us a message, and let us know, so that we can bring those items up and we can organize a presentation for the group. And again, thanks very much, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Saul.
Muchas gracias a todos. Muy esperando que sigan con bien y esperando que mantengan el interés en estos temas. Gracias. Saludos.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Hasta luego. Muchas gracias.
Hasta luego. Gracias.